the things nobody tells you about selling an estate is this. The hardest part usually isn't selling the house, it's everything that's left behind. Recently, I was asked to help settle the estate of a gentleman here in Central Virginia. He'd been a diesel mechanic all his working life. He and his late wife had also farmed their property for years. So he had a lot of equipment and tools for both occupations saved up, and the estate attorney was pretty diligent in seeing to their disposal. The auction was over. Most of the heavy equipment had already been removed. The house had been emptied. I remember standing there thinking, well, this shouldn't take too long. I couldn't have been more wrong. How did this come about? It all started with a phone call from an attorney friend of mine. Over the years, he's asked me to help with several estate properties, and this was one. The property belonged to a couple I had known for years. By the time I first saw the property, a lot of the hard work had already been done. The farm equipment had been auctioned off. Most of the large tools, engines, and equipment from the mechanic shop had either been sold or hauled away. The house had been emptied of most of the furniture. At first glance, I remember thinking, well, this shouldn't take too long. It didn't take long to realize I was wrong. There was still quite a bit left in the house. A few pieces of furniture, boxes, and all kinds of odds and ends still had to be removed. Before we could even think about putting the property on the market, we needed to hire a house cleaner and deal with pet odors that had gotten into the carpets. The house had to be cleaned, freshened up, made ready for the pictures. But the real challenge wasn't the house. No, it was the shop. This was the kind of shop you'd expect from someone who had spent a lifetime making a living with his hands. Workbenches lined the walls. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling. There were old file cabinets, refrigerators, coffee cans full of nuts and bolts, boxes of hardware, spare parts, and countless items that had been saved because at one time or another they had served a purpose. None of that had sold at auction. I don't think the auctioneer even tried to sell most of it. It was simply left behind. And before I could even take the first listing photograph, every bit of it had to be cleaned out. That's when I realized this wasn't going to be a simple cleanup. It was going to be a major project. The first thing I did was call my attorney friend. I explained what I had found and gave him a rough estimate of what it was going to take to get the property ready for sale. In a situation like this, the first thing I did was call my attorney friend. I explained what I had found and gave him a rough estimate of what it was going to take to get the property ready for sale. In a situation like this, you're trying to strike a balance. You want to do the job right, but you also don't want to spend a fortune doing it. After all, every dollar that goes into cleaning up the property is one less dollar that eventually goes to the heirs. But once he gave me the go-ahead, I arranged for the dumpsters. Then I took a long look around that shop and started figuring out what we were really dealing with. This wasn't just a workshop. It was a lifetime of accumulation. Workbenches lined the walls from one end of the building to the other. Almost every flat surface was covered with something. Even a pile of old family photos. Some things were neatly organized. Others had simply been set down years earlier and never moved again. Then there were the file cabinets. Every drawer held another surprise. Some were full of small parts. Others contained tools, fittings, and odds and ends that only the original owner probably understood. The list seemed endless. At that point, I realized I wasn't going to do this by myself, so I started making phone calls. I recruited what I jokingly call the most excellent crew of cleanup specialists. My brother and a few good friends who were willing to donate some time in exchange for taking home anything they found that was headed for the landfill. That turned out to be a pretty good incentive. Let's face it, there's something about digging through someone else's stuff that brings out the treasure hunter in all of us. We set aside several days for the project. Since everybody was volunteering, nobody could spend an entire day there, so we'd work a few hours at a time when we could make the time. Before we started, I laid out some simple ground rules. This goes in the trash dumpster. This goes in the scrap metal dumpster. And if it's headed for the trash, but you'd like to give it a new home, it's yours. Then we rolled up our sleeves and got to work. None of us realized just how much was still hidden in that old shop. To give you an idea of how much was still in that shop, we completely filled a 30-yard dumpster. That's 30 cubic yards of material headed to the landfill. Then we filled a second dumpster about 1/3 full with nothing but scrap metal. Now here's the part that I still like. The container company hauled away the scrap metal, sold it, and there was enough value in it to pay for both dumpsters. Not just the dumping fees, but the hauling and dumpster rental cost as well. In fact, there was enough left over that they actually mailed me a check for the difference. I wasn't expecting that. Then there was the unofficial recycling program. Remember my cleanup crew? Part of the agreement was that if something was headed for the landfill, but they thought it still had some life left in it, they were welcome to take it home. So, by the time we finished, I'd estimate 6, maybe 8 pickup truckloads of treasures had found new homes. There's an old saying that nature abhors a vacuum. I think workshops do too. Give somebody enough shelves, enough cabinets, enough empty containers, and enough years, and somehow every one of them gets filled. It isn't because people are hoarders. It's because every one of those things had a purpose once. Now, I know I'm generalizing a little here, but I don't think I'm very far from the truth. Whenever you're cleaning out a house or a workshop, everybody suddenly becomes an expert. They'll tell you, don't throw that away. That's worth something. Somebody could use that. That's too good to throw in the dumpster. And my personal favorite, you should take that to Goodwill. Well, that's easy to say. Nobody ever volunteers to load it up, haul it over there, unload it, and make the donation. Except, in this case, some of them actually did. Well, not to Goodwill, but to their homes and their own shops. I think part of it was having permission to take away something for free. I'd already told them, if it's headed for the dumpster and you can use it, take it home. Well, that opened the floodgates. By the time we finished, quite a few of those treasures had escaped the landfill in the backs of their trucks. Maybe that's the real lesson. One person's clutter really does become someone else's treasure. I just hope I'm not the realtor who gets the call 20 years from now to help clean out their workshops. After all, every workshop tells the story of the person who built it, and every estate tells the story of the life that was lived there. By the way, once the cleanup was finished, we photographed the property, put it on the market, and it's sold. I've seen this more than once over the years, especially on country properties. People stay in one place for decades. They build barns, shops, machine sheds, lean-tos. They repair things, save things, collect things, not because they're planning to burden somebody someday, but because every one of those items solved a problem once. Eventually, someone else has to decide what stays, what goes, and what memories are worth carrying forward. Every property tells a story. Sometimes that story isn't written in the house itself, it's written in everything that's been left behind. The real estate transaction is usually the easy part. Cleaning out a lifetime, that's the hard part. If you've ever had to clean out a family home, a farm, or a workshop, I'd love to hear your story. Leave it in the comments below.